Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. No one likes noisy neighbors, just like our OP in the first story was annoyed by the next-door junkie, but found a way to get back at him. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Night owl neighbor is disrespectful. Blast him back with some early morning tunes. This happened closing in on 2 years ago now, the night before Thanksgiving 2014. I was living in a row of single-story apartments, nice little one-bedrooms, but soon turned out to be what pretty much resembled a dinky little motel. Keep in mind it was 2 rows of apartments facing each other with the small parking lot in the middle, but for $700 a month for all utilities and my very own one-bedroom apartment, I was completely content with no roommates. Well, over the summer, I met my next-door neighbor. We'll call him DD because he looked like a druggy dude to me. Long hair, missing teeth, kind of messed up face. Just looked like a hard user, but was nice the few times I talked to him. The first month living there was perfect. Quiet, peaceful, just genuinely a good place to be living. However, after that, DD started getting obnoxious to me. He perched his TV up on the windowsill and left his window open all night watching South Park. I asked him a few times if he could turn it down. He obliged, but soon after it would be loud. I got used to sleeping with earplugs in and playing Hulu or Netflix to drown him out entirely. The audio from his TV just echoed around the complex, and even with a closed window, all you could hear was the high voices. So this is just a preface right now. This was July and August of 2014 when our high was around 85 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. I live in a colder area, so I was looking so forward to winter, so he'd close his window. The next day, we hit a high of 45. I was excited knowing at night we'd be down to around 21 degrees Fahrenheit and things would be quiet and peaceful. And yet, closing in on single digits, his window was wide open, blasting South Park yet again. Needless to say, I was getting upset and asking him was getting nowhere. Time goes on, I've learned ways around his nuisance, but now it's gotten worse. Now he's up all night and sleeps in the day, so as I'm going to bed, he's having people over at 10 p.m. and partying and talking outside until 4 a.m. So the night before Thanksgiving 2014, I'm planning on taking a trip down to my parents' place for Thanksgiving and wanted to leave before noon since it's a good 2-hour drive. Needless to say, I had a good feeling I was going to get a good night's sleep that night before, and as I laid my head down to sleep around midnight, I started hearing some people talking. Okay, no big deal. Put in the earplugs, put on my laptop, just work it through. But yet they must have planned for that, and shortly after I hear the bass starting, he put his speakers right up against the connecting wall between our 2 apartments. It's just reverberating through the walls at this point, and I'm getting upset. I tried calling the cops. They show up and give the whole please keep it quiet deal, but from outside they couldn't hear the bass like I could from inside with the walls amplifying the noise. So again, the music continues, and even with earplugs in, I just hear the pounding of the bass. I would not fall asleep for short periods, then wake up 30 minutes later from the noise, and this continued until around 4:30 a.m. when the music finally stopped. I finally get some rest and wake up around 9 a.m. feeling awful. But knowing they stopped so late at night, I hatch a plan, and thus the revenge begins. Years ago, I downloaded a Fleet Foxes album, and one of the songs, for whatever reason, has a good 6 minutes or so of dead silence after it. So right before I head out, I load that song up, follow it on a playlist with some blasting Foo Fighters song, set my speakers up against his wall, and head out the door to be gone until around midnight that night. The idea of hopefully waking him and his friends up with some cranking music knowing they were up late fills me with joy still to this day. And our second story. If you're in the building, you're working. So I used to work at a very big, very high-profile retail store. I was a cashier and most often was supervising the self-check. My town isn't huge, so most of the customers would at least recognize me. If you worked a certain amount of time, you were required to take an hour lunch break. When we had our lunch break, we fully clocked out and had no access to anything in the system. We were also told that we were expressly not allowed to do any work tasks or help any customers while on our break. If we did, the store could get in huge trouble, and we ourselves could even get fired. I did different things on my break, but this particular day, I had decided to buy a few things for lunch in the store and then head home to hang out with my mom while I ate, since I lived really close. I happily procured my miscellaneous goodies, including a treat for my mom, and happily stood in the line at the self-checkout, waiting for a register. I had my work vest with me, but it was off and slung over my shoulder. When I was next in line and a register opened, the lady shoved past me, literally knocking a precious pack of beef jerky out of my hands and beelined over to the open register. I was annoyed, but I didn't want to waste my lunch break, and she wasn't worth the confrontation, so I just quietly picked up my jerky and made my way over to another register, which had opened up literally about 10 seconds later. I was just happily and quietly scanning my goodies when I hear snapping and a loud, "Hey!" I turn around and find the same woman glaring at me. I blink at her bewildered before she says, "Hey, I need help over here. I scanned this twice. I need you to take it off." I looked over and saw that my coworker, who was actually over the self-check, was helping someone else. I look back at Karen and smile and politely say, "Oh, sorry, I'm on lunch break right now, so I can't help you. But coworker should be free to help in just a second." Karen didn't like that. She glared at me before asking, "Why can't you help me? You're right here." I blinked at her and explained that I wasn't clocked in because I was on my lunch break. I could get in trouble for helping her, and I couldn't really, even if I wanted to, because my ID wouldn't work in the system while I was clocked out. Karen stomps her foot and insists, "That's effing stupid. You work here. If you're in the building, you're working. You have to come help me." At this point, my coworker was done and had walked over to help, but Karen wasn't having it. "No, I asked them to help. They should do their effing job. They're just being lazy." I just started ignoring the lady and went back to checking out while my coworker tried to explain to her that I wasn't on the clock and couldn't help, but she's not having it. This adult woman throws the stuff she was buying on the ground, leaving her cart and everything there, and marches over to the customer service desk when my manager was standing. Karen then brings my manager over to the self-check and loudly exclaims, "Your employee was refusing to help me and being extremely rude." At this point, I'd finished checking out and was standing by the self-check exit. My manager just looks at me and says, "Goblin, are you in the clock?" I tell her nope, and that I'm just trying to get my lunch and go home. So the third person sternly explains to this woman that I'm not on the clock and I'm not allowed to or able to help her. Instead of going back and getting help from my coworker, she storms out screaming about how she's never going to shop there again. LOL. Okay, cool lady. I won't miss you. It didn't even stop there. As I was talking to my manager and a few coworkers and explaining what happened, Karen's husband comes in. He goes to Karen's register, finishes checking out and pays, then comes over to us. He then tells us that his wife is in the car sobbing and in severe emotional distress because of how I treated her and embarrassed her, and that, "I hope you're real proud of yourself." I just grinned at him and gave him a thumbs up. As he's walking out, my manager tells me I should feel free to take an extra 30 if I wanted. I then happily skipped home to enjoy my jerky in peace. Believe it or not, Karen, retail workers do in fact have basic human needs and rights. And our last story. HOA Karen sold my house. My grandmother was a wonderful woman. When I was a kid, I spent a lot of time at her house because my parents worked most of the time. I don't know how they did it, but sometimes they worked even on Christmas. Then I was always resentful of their absence from my life, but a little later I realized what they were striving for when most of my peers are still paying off their student loans and my parents paid it all off for me. So my grandmother almost replaced my mom and dad, and she cooked delicious food and jams. She owned a small house in the country that they bought with my grandfather. Unfortunately, he died in a car accident before I could walk on my own, so I don't remember him at all. After college, I had to fly to the Middle East for my job. I flew home every 2 months for 1 week, and one day when I arrived, just in the middle of the week, my grandmother died of a heart attack. We had just had time to bury her, and I had to fly back to work. That time was just terrible, and only immersion in work brought me out of my depression. Already there, I learned that in her will, my grandmother left all the money accumulated during her life to my parents, and I inherited her house. After that, I didn't visit there for more than 2 years. I sometimes visited my parents on holidays, but to go to the empty house of my grandmother, spending 3 hours by car to get there, I had no desire to do that. But enough of the context, and let's move on to our story. One day, I received a message from my childhood acquaintance who lived on the same street as my grandmother, congratulating me on the sale of the house. I thought it was a joke, but it wasn't. So I had to take an emergency vacation. Thank God my boss stepped in, and thank God I had vacation days saved up. So I took the first flight home. When I got there, my first thought was, F. There was somebody already living in the house, so I had to knock on the door because my key didn't fit and there was a different kind of keyhole. There was some dude sitting inside covered in nacho crumbs in his pajamas. "What's up, man?" he said. I said, "You're in my house." "Dude, no, you're in my house. Relax." What the hell? I own this house and I sure as hell didn't sell it to you. Dude. Yeah, dude, my mom bought it for me. I don't buy anything myself. Dude was like the silent Bob from the first movie, only less silent. Me. Here's my papers on the house, and it doesn't have your name or your mom's name on it. From upstairs, I heard a screechy voice shouting, "Gunter, your druggy friends are effing here again. I'm already carrying my shotgun." A lady about as tall as my navel and holding a shotgun came running down from upstairs. She looked like a female version of Ken DeVetian. "Lady, how dare you come back here again? G.D. it." Then she saw me in a shirt and tie, and her voice changed immediately. "Lady, did that fat butt steal your magazines again?" No, he stole my house. Lady, what? Strangely enough, this lady turned out to be adequate in the future and talked to me about everything. I found out that the house was sold to her by the guy across the street. I told her that I'll take care of it and went straight to him. It was a neighbor from the HOA. I knocked on his door and you should have seen his face. He, "What the F?" Me, "G.D. it, you sold my house?" Neighbor, "Oh, you should be dead. Get off my ridge or I'm calling the cops. I'll sue you for everything." He slams the door in my face and screams, "Police! Police! Police!" He runs into the back of the house and starts ringing the bell, which I realized was in his living room. What the F? I tried knocking on the door, but he kept ringing the bell and yelling. Turns out the guy was completely insane and somehow managed to forge the deed to the house and sell it to the lady. Later, he told the police that he had a dream that I was dead and told him that the house was his and he had to sell it or I would come and punish him. When they searched the guy, they found a lot of money in his house, so his relatives were able to pay Lady back the money for the house and pay a small compensation to her, and also compensate me so I don't have a claim against the old man from the HOA. At least the fact that he's in the HOA explains why he's so crazy. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.